I want to call to order the Amberley Village Council meeting of December 12th, 2022. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak.
Here.
Tom Muthing.
Here.
Keely Paul.
Here.
Jay Schatz.
Here.
Dara Wood.
Here.
Andrew Kakey.
Here.
Lieutenant Bloom.
Here.
Rick Kay.
Here. And for residents either watching this or will watch it on tape, I just want to note that the reason the village manager is not here is he tore his hamstring and had surgery last week. It is a very painful injury that will necessitate him being out of the office for at least a couple weeks. He is trying to work from home, but he's also going through obvious therapy and so forth. So keep him in your thoughts, and I'm sure he will eventually watch this meeting this evening. And if everyone could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first item on the agenda is our minutes from our last regularly scheduled meeting. Those minutes were circulated in advance. There were a couple small changes that were also circulated. Are there any further changes? Seeing none, the minutes can be considered approved. In Scott's absence, I will give the finance report as the chair of the Finance Committee. Earnings tax collections for the month of October were $333,000, which is a very good month. And year-to-date are $3,250,000. The budget was $3.4 million, so again, we're doing very well on our earnings tax, and our expectation is that we will probably come in somewhere around $3.6 million versus the budget of $3.4 million. Total revenues in the general fund through October were $5,950,000, and total expenditures were $5,450,000. The last 2 months of the year are generally higher expenditures, so I think the expectation is that, at worst, we're going to have a break-even year, which again, I think we originally were budgeted for a shortfall of about $200,000, so it's a good story. I wouldn't be surprised if we come in maybe $100,000 to the good. The village manager, when he hears me say that, probably will not be very happy that I say that, but that's my thought. The unencumbered fund balance at the end of October was $6,475,000, and that completes my finance report. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll now move on to committee reports, and first is the Planning Commission report.
This is the first reading of ordinance 2022-6, changing the zoning on portions of the property located at 2121 Section Road from Residence A to Industrial B. Adam Greenberg, president of Novalart Manufacturing Company, requested to rezone a portion of the Topics property at that location. If the rezoning is approved, it would reclassify approximately 3.5 acres of the property from Residence A to Industrial B. The Topics property is an 11.2 acre parcel located in the southwest portion of the village with 3.5 acres zoned Residence A and 7.7 acres zoned Industrial B. The area of the property impacted by the rezoning includes the following. Section road frontage to the north, which extends approximately 200 feet south along the frontage, east of the building, which extends approximately 75 feet west along the east of the property line, and south of the building, which extends approximately 75 feet north along the south property line. As industrial buildings are not permitted in a residential zoning district, a zoning change will be required to allow the expansion into these zones. In an effort to retain Topics in the village, staff has recommended Topics requests the remaining 3.5 acres of their property be rezoned to match the industrial zoning of the rest of the property. While rezoning the 3.5 residential acres may not provide the perfect solution, it affords the necessary zoning for Topics to consider expansion options within the village. Following the public hearing on December 5 of this month, the Planning Commission recommended that council approve rezoning of the Residence A area north of the building towards Section Road and to the south towards Ohio Pulp Mill, south towards the Ohio Pulp Mill property to Industrial B. The Planning Commission also recommended the current Residence A zoning along the east property line be preserved. In consideration of the Planning Commission's recommendation, the council will conduct the first reading of ordinance 2022-6 today and then set a date for a public hearing. After the public hearing, council has the option of approving or denying the rezoning request as recommended by the Planning Commission, approving with additional conditions, or denying the rezoning.
Are there any questions? The one thing I would note to all council members is that I did attend the Planning Commission, and the public hearing was well attended. A lot of the residents that were along the street did attend and present testimony. And, initially, topics was talking about having the strip closest to those residents also be included in the rezoning. And at the meeting, topics agreed that they would pull that off the table. And so those residents were all very happy with the outcome. So the Councilman Bardak did a great job managing the Planning Commission meeting. And for a time it was a very tense meeting, but it was actually a very great outcome. And I think all the residents were very happy, and I think Topics was happy with the outcome too. So I think the Planning Commission put it in a very good place.
I have a question on that point. So with that change, how much of a buffer does that create between topics, just like in a ballpark sense? Them changing their requests to not have that?
I think it depends on how much of the frontage they chose to use. If they
Got it.
decide to go closer to the street, they're restricted on how much they can use. I know council might be able to explain that better than me, but I think it really depends on how far towards section they want to proceed.
Got it.
But the existing buffer between all the people on Bluegrass and Topics is maintained. So that does not change at all.
Right.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to the Finance Committee, and I apologize in advance as Chair of the Finance Committee if you get tired of my voice, but I have a number of items I have to report on this evening. First item is a request to authorize the village manager to enter into a contract for our property and casualty insurance. We go through this process every year on our property and casualty insurance, and many years we have not gone back out to bid, but we did go out to bid this year. Our advisors sent bids out to, or sent requests out to 13 different agencies. We received 7 different proposals, and what those proposals all indicated was that the existing provider of our insurance is still the best provider for us. And so I am proposing, the resolution would, hang on one second. The resolution requests that we continue with Zurich at a premium of $87,653, which is an increase of about 3 to 4% from last year, which is a reasonable percent we felt. And just as a perspective, again, our insurance administrator has done a great job on the program. We are still, even 10 years later, at a lower place than we were 10 years ago as far as our insurance costs. So it has gone up a little bit over the last few years, but it's still a very good program. So I move that we authorize the village manager to enter into contract with Zurich for our property and casualty insurance.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we authorize resolution 2022-33, which would authorize the village manager to enter into a contract for our property and casualty insurance. Are there any questions? If not, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 2022-33. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Be it noted that that resolution passes unanimously. And then next is the resolution requesting that we give the village manager the authority to enter into a contract with Assured Partners, which is our insurance advisor. Assured Partners has been our advisor for a number of years. Michael Fischel, who is a resident of the village, is a senior vice president with Assured, and they, as I said earlier, they have done an excellent job, not only on our insurance program, but this year we had, I think in an earlier council meeting, we mentioned that there was some damage done to the salt barn, and Michael did a great job working with staff to get us an additional amount to pay for that damage. And so, Michael, we enter into a contract with Assured Partners every 3 years, and so before you this evening is a request to allow us to extend that for another 3 years. It is for a proposed fee of $15,000. The fee that they had about 10 years ago was $15,000. They did agree to reduce it over that intervening 9-year period to $13,000, but they have found that they now have to request for an increase back to where they were 10 years ago. And we all feel it's very reasonable, and as far as the Finance Committee. So I move that we approve Resolution 2022-34, authorizing the village manager to enter into a contract with Assured Partners.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2022-34, authorizing the village manager to enter into a contract with Assured Partners. Are there any questions? If not, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 2022-34. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Be it noted that that resolution passes unanimously. Next before you this evening is Resolution 2022-35. Again, this is an annual process that we go through, and this is the authorization to transfer unclaimed monies to the general fund and to authorize moving some money out of the general fund into the unclaimed funds fund. So this is a process where we put money into the unclaimed funds, and after a 5-year period, if it remains unclaimed, it can then come back to the general fund. So before you is a resolution, and this would move $558.75 from the unclaimed fund to the general fund. So these are funds that over the 5-year period, we've tried to locate the people. These are tax refunds and vendor checks, and we have not been successful in finding. So this would move that. We are also requesting that, and this was a late change, the earlier resolution that all the other council members was suggesting that $181.05 get moved from the general fund into the unclaimed. We're now proposing that it be $318.56, and the difference is a check that the finance, Kathy Harcourt, has been trying to chase down. It was a tax refund check, and I won't say it was to another state. The state says they've been paid, but our check has not been cashed as far as we're concerned. So we're going to continue to try to chase this down, or we're going to put it into the unclaimed funds for right now. So I move that we approve Resolution 2022-35, transferring $558.75 to the general fund and $318.56 to the unclaimed monies fund.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2022-35, transferring unclaimed funds to the general fund and transferring some unclaimed funds to the unclaimed monies fund. Are there any questions? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2022-35. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Be it noted that that resolution passes unanimously. Next before you is ordinance 2022-7. Again, this is a annual process that we go through, that at this time of the year, we amend our appropriations for fiscal year 2022 if we find that there's items that need to be amended. And the main item that we have to amend, and we've known about this one for a while, is we have to amend to transfer $80,000 to the capital projects fund, and this was due to higher capital projects in this year, and that's just, that money comes from the general fund into the capital projects fund, and this would be $80,000 would be authorized to be transferred to the capital project fund. Also, we're proposing that the police levy fund, the revenues into the police levy fund were higher by $4,000. And so in section 2 of the ordinance, you'll note that. The mayor's court custodial fund, we're proposing that revenues be reduced by $10,000. And again, that was because of lower revenues this year. And the employee health insurance custodial fund, and again, this fund takes the amounts that we receive from employees into the fund, and then we disperse it out. So again, you're at the beginning of the year, you're estimating as to how much is going to be there, but we're proposing that that be reduced by $663.76. And then finally, on the appropriation side, those were the revenues. On the appropriation side, the police levy fund, we would increase by $4,000, and that's because of the higher revenues that was mentioned earlier. The stormwater utility fund would be increased by $15,000. The mayor court custodial fund would be reduced by $5,000. And then the employee health insurance custodial fund would be increased by the whopping amount of $28.56. So I move that we approve ordinance 2022-7. It's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2022-7. Are there any questions? If not, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt ordinance 2022-7. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak.
Yes.
Tom Muthing.
Yes.
Keely Paul.
Yes.
Jay Schatz.
Yes.
Dara Wood.
Yes.
Okay. And now, finally, on the Finance Committee, before you is ordinance 2022-8, making our appropriations for fiscal year 2023. So I want to note a couple items. First, on our revenues, we're projecting that the revenues for the earnings tax, as I said earlier, the budget for 2022 was $3.4 million. We're proposing that the budget be $3.7 million for 2023, and which will be a 2.7% increase from our expectation of what it will come in at for 2022. Total estimated revenue for the general fund is $6,146,851. On the expenditure side, with the exception of the capital, everything pretty much has been tracked as we would expect. No big changes. To their credit, on the police side, the actual police budget from 2022 2023 is actually very close to the same budget of 2022. So again, we're being successful in holding down some expenditures. But on the capital side for next year, there are some very large items that we have to spend money on. And I want to mention a couple of those. These are items that are associated with this building, and this building is now over 20 years old, and these were things that we're now having to spend things related to the building that, you know, we haven't spent for 20 years. So these are one-time items, so it's not unusual that we have the high expenditures, and we've said for a number of years that we've been, you know, we were glad that we've been successful in building the general fund back up, because our expectation was we would have one-time items. But the one-time items that we have for next year is that the shooting range, the firing range, needs to be updated and cleaned up. That's going to be $120,000. The boiler for this building needs to be replaced, and that's $44,000. The generator for this building needs to be replaced, and that's $81,000. And one of the HVAC units will need to be replaced for $25,000.
I want to add that that means one old AC unit remains. And so that could also be added depending on when it decides to plunk out.
Yeah. And then there is a dump truck that we actually ordered earlier this year, but we knew when we ordered it earlier this year, it wouldn't come in till 2023. And that dump truck is costing $200,000. And the cost of the dump truck has gone up significantly over the past couple of years. If the trucks that we ordered a few years ago were $120,000, and they're now up to $200,000. So, you know, I look at this as there's probably about almost $400,000 of capital items in next year's budget that I would describe as one-offs. And the reason that is very significant is that when the Finance Committee first reviewed this budget, we saw a deficit for next year of $650,000. So at first the Finance Committee said, you know, this is a major problem. But then when we realized that there's $400,000 of one-time items on there, and also because of the way we budget, or as a municipality budgets, you have to budget a little bit on the high side because you have to cover the items. You don't want to be short on your budget. So traditionally, our budgets have come in around $200,000 lower than what we budget. So when we considered the $400,000 one-time items and that $200,000 cushion, as I would call it, the Finance Committee became very comfortable with the budget and therefore was comfortable in recommending the approval of the budget. So what you have in Ordinance 2022-8 is in Section 1, those are all the appropriations for the general fund. And then what we do with the remaining funds is that generally we appropriate expenditures. So for instance, in Section 2, we do the street fund. So the street fund will appropriate the anticipated revenues that we're going to get in next year, plus the beginning balance. In the case of the law enforcement trust fund, the same thing. And that's Section 3. Section 4 is the permissive motor vehicle license fund. And again, that is associated with the street fund and is used for street maintenance. We do the same thing. We appropriate the beginning balance plus anticipated revenues. For the police and fire pension revenue, special revenue fund, we do the same thing. We appropriate anticipated revenues. For the Mayor's Court Computer Fund, that actually is the amount that we anticipate we may spend for next year is $7,500. For the Police Levy Fund, again, we appropriate the anticipated expenditures or anticipated revenues into the fund that we get from the police levy. For the Employee Severance Fund, $125,000. In this case, we appropriate what we anticipate we may spend for expected retirements in the year 2023. The Mercy Tax Increment Fund, we appropriate the amount that we anticipate will be spent in 2023, and what we spend in the Mercy Tax Increment Fund, we get in revenues for the whole amount for the people on the north site, the buildings on the north site, but then we have to pay back to the City of Cincinnati School District for the amount of tax that they have foregone because of going into that. Stormwater Utility Fund, we appropriate into the beginning balance plus the anticipated revenues. The Unclaimed Money Fund would be the amount that sits in that fund. But again, that will be something that we come to the end of the year and we decide how much still remains. But that's what sits into the fund. So if we're successful in finding all the parties, that whole amount would be paid out. The Mayor's Court Custodial Fund is anticipated amount that we would come into Mayor's Court. The Employee Health Insurance Fund is the amount we anticipate getting in for the health insurance. The Valley Band Escrow Fund is anticipated expenditures. And then the JEDS, all the JEDS funds, again, is the amount that we anticipate getting in. So those are the appropriations for 2023. Finance Committee reviewed all this and recommends approval. So I hereby move that we approve ordinance 2022-8.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2022-8, making appropriations for fiscal 2023. Are there any questions? Not, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2022-8. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak.
Yes.
Tom Muthing.
Yes.
Healy Paul.
Yes.
Jay Schatz.
Yes.
Dara Wood.
Yes.
And that completes the Finance Committee report. We'll now move on to the Streets, Public Utility, and Sewers Committee. And in Councilman Rosen's absent, Councilman Bardak will present.
Thank you. Resolution 2022-36 authorizes the Ohio Department of Transportation to conduct bridge inspections in the village. To grant permission to the Ohio Department of Transportation, this is seeking to have them perform annual inspections on bridges within the village in the 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026 years. The Ohio Revised Code requires annual inspections of all bridges in Ohio to be filed with the Ohio Department of Transportation. Prior to 2013, the Village Maintenance Department inspected the bridges and culverts and made minor repairs as needed. 3 structures are within the village's responsibility to inspect. One's on Beachlands Drive south of Section Road. The second is on Fair Oaks Drive south of Section Road. And the third is on Elbrook Avenue north of Section Road. The annual cost to have the 3 bridges in the village is between $2,000 and $2,200 per bridge, with the potential total cost to the village of $6,000 to $6,600 annually. ODOT just announced the renewal of the program for another 3-year period from 2023 through 2026 to perform annual inspections of municipalities with populations of less than $50,000. An attractive advantage to the program is the independent evaluation of the village's structures on an annual basis is 100% funded by ODOT. Resolution 2022-36 allows the village to take advantage of this program by permitting ODOT to inspect the bridges, resulting in savings on inspection and filing costs. The village is responsible for any repairs needed after the inspections. The 3 bridges have been filed with ODOT to be inspected in the future, but need council authority to perform the inspections. So I will move to adopt Resolution 2022-36, authorizing the Ohio Department of Transportation to perform municipal bridge inspections within Amberley Village on Beachlands Drive, Fair Oaks Drive, and Elbrook Drive.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 2022-36, authorizing the Ohio Department of Transportation to inspect the 3 bridges that that Councilman Bardak noted.
Does this mean, it sounds like this is going to save us approximately $6,000 to $7,000.
Right.
Okay, so yay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2022-36. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Be noted that that resolution passes unanimously.
Resolution 2022-37 authorizes a shared work agreement with the Village of Gulf Manor for repaving on Weehee Road. The purpose is to reimburse the Village of Gulf Manor for administering the Weehee Road Street Rehabilitation Program. Earlier this year, the village expressed its interest in partnering with the Village of Gulf Manor to bid for our portion of Weehee Road for roadway improvements. Most of Weehee Road is in Gulf Manor with a short section in the village. The Village of Gulf Manor Street Program will be making road improvements on Weehee Road to our corporation line near 6545 Weehee Road. The village's portion of Weehee Road was last paved in 1994. By working together, the communities are hoping to make the road improvements more competitive and to take advantage of the fact that as 2 small and contiguous communities, some operational economies of scale may be realized. In addition, the village is able to get this section of Weehee Road paved to coincide with the SJS Packaging's relocation of a business venture they acquired from Fairfield. The Streets, Public Utilities, and Sewers Committee was presented with the idea on December 1 and was supportive. Gulf Manor established the bidding requirement and has agreed to hold the bid bonds with the understanding that the performance bond will not be released until the entire project is accepted. So I will make a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-37 to authorize the village manager to enter into a reimbursement agreement with the Village of Gulf Manor for repaving work on Weehee Road.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2022-37, authorizing our joint agreement with Gulf Manor for the paving of Weehee Road. Are there any questions or comments? I think the cost to us is $45,000. I think that's right.
I think you're right, I don't see it on the face page.
Okay. It's between 45 and 50,000.
It's about, yeah, you're right, 45.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt Resolution 2022-37. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Be it noted that that resolution passes unanimously.
That concludes my report.
Okay, we'll now move on to the Public Buildings and Parks Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had a meeting on the 11th. Of all these pieces of paper in front of me. There we go. We talked about 3 things. The Amberley leash law regulations, the Amberley Green put in new leash rules, or for the first time leash rules last year, and we agreed that we would review the policy annually. This is still a very charged issue. And all of council was in attendance, plus the chief, the sergeant, and 6 village residents. For those that don't know, this issue started with growing increase in dog visitors to the park. There were dog bites, jumping up and knockdowns, as well as leash entanglements with people. So dogs getting tangled up with people. And since we didn't have any official rules, the police had little to no sway over the incidents. Since the establishment of the regulations and the installation of the on-site kiosk, as well as an education push by the police force, thank you, police force, they have dramatically reduced the number of reported issues, with none in the past 3 months. They have issued a few warnings on site, but they haven't had any reported issues in more than 3 months. So as I said, this is very charged. Since the village manager is out, and I had some confusion over what needed to happen in his absence, we're not going to vote on this tonight, but the village manager does have the authority to make changes to the regulations, and the council would just need to advise him. So that was our first topic, and it was quite exciting. Our next item was tennis court regulations. So as many of you know, and we have discussed previously, We Thrive ran a pilot program for pickup pickleball this summer, which was a huge success, and the committee has approved them to continue in 2023. The existing tennis court ordinance needs to be updated to include pickleball. So we are updating an ordinance, so this will require multiple readings, but I do want to let people know that predominantly the changes are around changing the word tennis to the phrase tennis and pickleball. We've made a couple of other small changes, and we will need to update the signage on the tennis courts. But yes, this is an ordinance, and we'll have to do 3 readings. So I'm going to finish with what we did at the meeting, and then I'll go to the ordinance. Our next thing was the municipal park fields, one of which is the Greff Field. And we've had a request from a resident about being added to the schedule. We're reviewing this, and what we've learned is that we still have a lot. So we need to meet with the volunteer scheduler to learn more. Currently, the fields are scheduled by a volunteer across Nativity, PRM, and the JCC. And the resident asked that they add another league to the schedule. So essentially, we just learn more about that before we can move forward. And then the sign for the north site entrance, the foundation is in. And the AC for the municipal building, which Tom mentioned, we're still waiting for a unit, and we hope it gets here before weather warms up. Okay. So this is the first reading. First reading of ordinance 2022-9, which authorizes changes to section 98.05 of the village code regarding rules and regulations for the village-owned tennis courts. So this all goes back to the addition of pickleball striping, which we did when we had the courts redone in 2021. 2 of the 4 courts are lined for pickleball, and we are looking at cost estimates for lining the other 2 courts. But now that pickleball is growing, as many of you know, and we're definitely going to have pickleball again next summer, we need to update the ordinance. So, first reading? Okay. So, this is just to upright changes to 98.05.
Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Okay, this again will be, we'll have the second reading at the January meeting and third reading at February.
So that's all I have. That concludes my report.
Okay. Police and Fire Committee.
Police and Fire recently met and discussed the budget for the 2023 calendar year. Wasn't tremendously eventful. Anyone have any additions to that? Feel free to add to it. I don't have a formal report tonight for that committee. That concludes my report.
And I just mentioned that, again, as part of our council's budget process, Councilman Bardak mentioned that the Police and Fire Committee reviewed the budget. They look at the whole police side, and the Streets Committee goes through the maintenance side, the same thing. So we have multiple reviews of the budget just to make sure that we do understand everything that's in the budget. We'll now move on to the Compensations and Benefits Committee.
This is the second reading of ordinance 2022-5 authorizing changes to the personal time for employees. The purpose is to modify the provisions of the employee personal time coming out of sick leave balances. The Compensation and Benefits Committee met on May 8th to discuss employee compensation. As part of the discussion, there was a presentation on behalf of the employees asking for consideration of employee benefit changes. 3 changes were requested: increase in personal time from 16 to 24 hours, that personal time no longer come out of their sick bank, and discussion of the sick time payout, which was changed in 2013. The committee agreed to further discussions about the benefits so as to follow up. A follow-up meeting was held on August 29th. The outcome of that meeting was the committee asked for further study into the potential change in personal hours and how this would affect scheduling, particularly in the police department. The committee reconvened on November 7th and heard favorable recommendation from Scott Larman to change how personal time would be charged. Our code currently reads as follows: each full-time employee of the village shall be entitled up to 16 personal hours off each calendar year, which shall be charged against accumulated and unused sick leave. The request for employees and recommendation from the Compensation and Benefits Committee is to delete the phrase, quote, which shall be charged against accumulated and unused sick leave, close quote. This recommended action benefits employees in that personal hours used will no longer reduce their bank of sick hours, thus allowing them to retain 16 sick leave hours per year. For newer employees or those with lower sick leave balances, this action will primarily benefit them. The benefit to employees who are maxed out on sick leave accumulation is negligible unless they need to use sick leave hours. The Compensation and Benefits Committee is recommending ordinance 2022-5, but the committee would like this to be in effect for 2023. 3 readings are necessary unless a motion is made to waive the 3 readings. A first reading was held on November 14th. A second reading is occurring tonight. The third reading would be scheduled for January 9th. Unless a motion to waive the third reading is adopted tonight. Regardless of whether the legislation is approved tonight or on January 9th, the ordinance is intended to become effective January 1st, 2023 as proposed. And that concludes our report.
We get the second reading, and we'll go throughout having the third reading, January.
Okay.
Are there any questions? Okay. We'll now move on to the Land Development Committee.
We met back in September. I think we've given this
Yeah.
report already. I think that's a legacy.
Okay. So
But I can mention, actually, it could be part of the new business, but the last time we talked about the Reading Road corridor.
Yeah, why don't you go
Why don't
ahead?
we do that here? The port just got some good news in terms of money from the state to the tune of $17 million, and that fortunately includes money to demolish the Drake and Carousel motels, finally. So that's going to be a big boost to the Reading Road corridor plans, opening up about 6.5 acres for development. So that's good news. As we know, anything good happening on Reading Road there is good news for us.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay. The manager's obviously not here, and he did submit his report to all of council. And so, are there any questions anyone has from anything that the manager noted in his report? Okay, and I do not believe that there's a chief's report tonight. Okay, for the mayor's report, the one item from last month's meeting dates for 2023, I do not see any dates that, from my perspective, need to be changed. Has everyone looked at the meeting dates? I mean, we look okay from a standpoint of holy days and things like that, that we can just maintain the regular meeting date. Okay. So the meeting dates will continue to be for 2023, our regular scheduled date of the second Monday of each month. Okay. Two other items I want to mention. I did attend last week the We Thrive recognition dinner, and Amberley was recognized along with other communities. We have now been a We Thriving community for 8 years, and that is the maximum number. We're up, right up there at the max. A proclamation was given to us from Hamilton County Public Health recognizing the village's efforts in the We Thrive program. It was nice having the dinner back in person. The dinner was not in person the last 2 years, obviously, because of COVID, but it was nice having everyone get back together and recognize the other communities and hear what the other communities are doing. So that was a very nice occasion. The other thing I wanted to mention related to what was on our earlier agenda and specifically on the rezoning for the topics, I believe we will hold a public hearing at our next meeting as part of the process to get rezoning. The Planning Commission holds a public hearing and we hold a public hearing. We will announce the public hearing separately, but I think our expectation will be that we'll hold a public hearing during the second reading of that particular ordinance. And then the last thing I wanted to mention as the mayor was simply happy holidays to all our residents. And I hope everyone has a great holiday and a safe holiday during this period of time of year. So that concludes my mayor's report. Are there any questions? Is there any other new business? Seeing none, we can consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you, and hopefully our village manager will be back with us next meeting in person.